Honourable Vice President of India, Hamid Ansari Sahib, the Chairperson of the Press Council of India, Justice Katju, the Honourable Secretary of the Press Council of India, my colleague, Secretary in the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Shri Bimal Julka, Shri Sahib, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to commence by congratulating the media fraternity on this auspicious occasion. The National Press Day always provides a unique opportunity to reflect on the state and the role of media in the current milieu. In the last 2 decades, the media landscape has undergone an exponential transformation. This epochal change has been facilitated by the emergence of the World Wide Web. Starting life in the Defense Advanced Projects Laboratory of the Pentagon, it has truly revolutionized the way we live and conduct our interactions. As I have stated on numerous occasions earlier, the internet is the largest experiment involving anarchy in history, and it has succeeded. The last 4 words are mine. It represents the largest ungoverned space on planet Earth. Never before in history have so many people from so many places have had so much power on their fingertips. Every 2 days, more digital content is created than from the dawn of civilization until 2003. What is evolving is a tale of 2 civilizations, one physical that has evolved over the millennia, and one virtual that is still very much in formation. The new media rides on the back of this World Wide Web. What still has not been analyzed in depth and detail is how this democratization of news creation, aggregation, and dissemination, a bottoms-up process, sans editorialization, is impacting both print and broadcasting newsrooms, in addition to transforming the contours of the media space. There are some other pertinent questions that the first generation of the digital age should address with some measure of dispatch to ensure that the process of defining agreed global rules of engagement commences in right earnest in the virtual civilization also. For example, at what point does a personal tweet, essentially a digital freedom of expression, turn into a mass broadcast, a telecommunications business, in effect one that has to be held to certain standards of accountability? Allow me to turn to the other hard question of our times and the subject of our deliberations today, that is media and public interest. Public interest has but myriad subjective connotations. It can and may mean various things to various people. But what public interest certainly cannot mean is the promotion, propagation, and proclamation of private interest in any area of human endeavor. Speaking in the Raj Sabha in 1974, late Shri R.K. Mishra, an eminent journalist himself, made an incisive, though a very blunt, and some may turn, even a provocative observation about the media and private interest. An articulation that raises hackles in certain very influential quarters in our country whenever it is reiterated. He stated, and with your permission I quote, "Now where is the freedom of the press? What do we have? In India we have the freedom of the newspaper owner. In India we have the freedom of the newspaper proprietor, and in some cases the delegated freedom which is enjoyed by the newspaper managers. And the working journalist will continue to be paid employees doing whatever the newspaper proprietor wants him to do," unquote. Pungent but profound words that have proven to be almost prophetic in their import. Though obviously this adage does not have universal application even in the Indian context, but a few would seriously contest that selectively it's a non sequitur. Rather than react with the usual display of indignation, perhaps the media industry would be better served if stakeholders were to calmly and dispassionately consider evolving the means and measures of putting Chinese walls cast in concrete between commercial considerations and editorial autonomy. Recently, in influential publications, very eminent editors have voluntarily relinquished their managerial responsibilities. This is indeed laudable and an example that inspires emulation by one and all. On the occasion of the National Press Day, we must rededicate ourselves to the cause of empowering the working journalist, as well as creating the necessary wherewithal that supports truly independent media initiatives. Corporate ownership of the media is an inescapable reality, as is surrogate political ownership, as well as government ownership in the public broadcaster format. While one can possibly argue about the pros and cons of each of these paradigms, but life is circumscribed by the given reality and not the utopia of Shangri-Las. The moot point being that there are diverse interests always at play in the media space. The challenge, therefore, is to always try and find the elusive golden mean so that public interest does not become a permanent casualty at the altar of competing and contradictory private interests. In the UK, this dilemma was articulated cogently in 1995 by the then Conservative government's white paper on media ownership. The paper stated, and I quote, "A free and diverse media are an indispensable part of the democratic process. They provide the multiplicity of voices and opinions that informs the public, influences opinion, and engenders political debate. They promote the culture of dissent, which any healthy democracy must have. If one voice becomes too powerful, this process is placed in jeopardy and democracy is damaged," unquote. This is perhaps why, post the Lord Levinson inquiry, the British government, with broad multi-partisan support, promulgated the Royal Charter on Media Regulation recently, despite opposition by powerful interests in the British media industry. Unfortunately, this development has not found resonance in the otherwise vacuous realm of public polemics in our country. In both the Indian and even the global context, certain structural paradoxes have emerged which require the focus of concerned, consensuous, and committed stakeholders of the public discourse. They are paradox of the short fuse, increased information dissemination mechanisms, an increased intolerance for the other's point of view. The paradox of flawed revenue models, questionable revenue generation practices. Paradox of TRPs, the truth. Sensational media trials, a fair judicial trial guaranteed by Article 21 of the Constitution. Anonymity masquerading as privacy in the new media space, the spectre of the hidden people and the dark net. Non-emergence of global rules of engagement in the virtual civilization. Last mile neutrality among carriage providers so that content providers get a level playing field and are able to reap the benefits of convergence. And the quintessential dilemma, self-regulation, a statutory remit. If I were to liberate my thoughts from the seemingly vexed issues that bedevil the media remit and ask a very simple question as to what is the fundamental public interest of our times, the answer can perhaps be articulated in one simple sentence: upholding the constitutional values which define the very idea of India. As we go about our everyday chores, dark clouds of fascism loom ominously over the horizon. A great evil stalks our land. The first casualty of this spectre would be the constriction of liberal spaces, curtailment of creativity, and circumscribing the right to challenge the conventional and think off the beaten path. If the alleged expose about state-sponsored stalking is correct, I would be worried, not as a woman, but as a civil libertarian, about the Orwellian state that some esteemed gentlemen seek to construct. William Shakespeare, in his epic Julius Caesar, wrote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads to fortune. Omitted all voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures." History bears testimony to the harsh reality that evil has always triumphed when good men have chosen to keep quiet and do nothing. When the immediate takes precedence over the imperative, when, like Lord Neville Chamberlain, we have been naive enough to believe that compromising with the forces of fascism, right reaction and national subversion can buy us the peace of our times. At such a crossroads, ladies and gentlemen, today do we stand? I once again would like to thank the Press Council for inviting me and having me here. Thank you.
Mr. Mohammed Hamid Ansari Sahib, Honourable the Union Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Manish Tewari ji, Mr. Sahib, other members of the Press Council, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the National Press Day function, which is held every year on 16th November, the day on which the Press Council of India started functioning. The press in India has had a glorious past in serving the people of India. We have produced eminent journalists like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi, Nikhil Chakravarti, etc. And even now we have many eminent journalists who have shed luster on the profession. To encourage journalism, we have started since last year National Awards for Excellence in Journalism. And this year also the awards will be given by Honourable the Vice President of India. The topic which we have chosen for this year's function is the role of the media in serving the public interest. The press is the agency of the people, which gives them information about what is going on in the country as well as the world. And this information is necessary so that the people can form rational opinions on public issues, which is a sine qua non for a democracy. It is therefore necessary that this information is accurate and objective. A heavy responsibility therefore lies on members of the press in this connection. Today, India is facing huge social and economic problems. I am sure the members of the press will do their patriotic duty to the nation ably and conscientiously. Thank you.
Honourable Manish Tewari ji, Justice Markande Katju Sahib, Shavan Garg ji, Srimati Viva Bhargava, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to join you as we celebrate the National Press Day. The Press Council of India was established on November 16, and this day is rightfully commemorated throughout the country. It recommends and honors the values of ethical and free reporting. It is the objective and raison d'etre of the Press Council of India, which has strongly upheld the principles of ethics and self-regulation. India is the world's largest democracy, and despite its imperfections, remains a good example of functioning, vigorous, constitutional and democratic state structure. Like most other liberal democracies, our functioning is predicated on separation of powers between the executive, legislature and the judiciary, and a significant role for the press and the media. The underlying principle of freedom of press and expression within the four corners of the law defines our democratic identity. Both are guaranteed as fundamental rights by the Constitution. Freedom of the press and media is a logical corollary. The Press Council is a mechanism for the press to regulate itself. Its raison d'etre is rooted in the concept that in a democratic society, the press needs at once to be free and responsible. The press and media in India give vigorous expression to different perspectives on political development and social issues. The number of publications in numerous languages, the number of audio-visual channels, and the growing availability of information through social networks and digital communications add both to the complexity of the profession and the growing outreach to an increasingly larger number of readers, viewers and netizens. Today, we have over 90,000 registered publications and over 1,000 TV channels, both under news and non-news categories. Doordarshan itself has 37 channels with over 250 FM radio stations and numerous internet websites. The press and media scene in India veers from reasoned debate, understated expressions and moderation in views to polemical overstatement, hysterical outpouring and plain misinformation. When this happens in a number of languages over a wide geographical spread and virtually round the clock, it constitutes the din of democracy and often creates more confusion than intended. It nevertheless upholds the principle of free expression within the law and remains an essential part of a functioning democratic system. Apart from being the world's largest democracy, our demographic profile makes India perhaps the democracy which has the largest number of young people. 51.8% of India's population is below 35 years of age. It is estimated that in the next general election due in 2014, there will be over 30% of the electorate who will be first-time voters and who will seek to reflect their aspirations and anxieties at the hustings next year. They would also need to understand the functioning of our democracy, the manner of its impact on their lives, and their responsibilities as citizens. Two questions come to mind. Firstly, should not the right of freedom of expression carry with it the responsibility of ethical conduct, reasoned persuasion, and a projection of values and priorities that strengthen our institutions? Secondly, should it not be the responsibility of the press and the media, apart from parents and teachers, to inform and educate the youth so that they become aware of their rights and their responsibilities towards their families, their community, their state, their region, their nation, and to the global order? The press and media clearly has a role both as a communicator and as persuader, so that the national debate can be enriched and the democratic structure strengthened. There is another aspect of the responsibility of the press and media that I wish to heighten. This relates to the need to articulate consistently and effectively the Indian discourse on a wide range of global issues in a world that is increasingly becoming interdependent and in which the weight of India has grown over decades. India's press has a long and venerated history and played an important role in the freedom struggle. Gandhiji himself was perhaps the most influential editor and journalist of his time. He used his writings to give Indians a sense of pride and dignity, apart from motivating them to unite and fight for freedom. We have every reason to be proud of the strength and diversity of the Indian media. All indications are that our press and media will continue to grow and continue to carefully adopt and adapt to the new digital technologies of communication to widen its reader-viewer base and leverage the growing number to increase both its influence and revenue. But what remains crucial is the credibility and commitment of the press and the media to objectivity and to the elusive search for truth. The concept itself can be elusive, has hidden pitfalls, and requires closer scrutiny. I recall a passage I had read some years back that was telling and worthy of being shared with this audience, and I quote, "The administrative truth was passed on to the media. Media took the official truth and transformed it into media truth. The judiciary accepted the official and the media truth and transformed it into judicial truth. Media praised the judicial truth without attending the trial." End of quotation. It has been noted by a careful observer that the two roles that newspapers have played are credible informational and critical investigative adversarial. The two can and do complement each other and thereby build trust so essential for retaining readership. Public education is one aspect of it, analysis and criticism is another. The latter also leads to discovering happenings in need of correctives and thereby to public good. Some disconcerting developments in relation to the media have also been noticed. The chairman of the Press Council of India has observed some time back that the media often diverts attention from real issues to non-issues, often divides the people, and at times promotes superstition. Perhaps the regional media shoulders a greater share of this avoidable burden. In relation to the economic liberalization in the post-1991 period, the mainstream media has generally adopted a laudatory tone and tends to underplay its negative socio-economic effects, though of course there have been excellent exceptions. The need for presenting a more balanced picture is essential. There are also larger systemic issues that need to be considered as they directly affect the media's objectivity and credibility. These relate to cross-media ownership, the phenomena of paid news, media ethics, and the need for effective and viable self-regulatory mechanisms, the decreasing role of editors and their editorial freedom, and the need to improve the working condition of media personnel, including their safety and security. Each of these is the subject of vigorous ongoing debate. There is an imperative need to put in place the needed correctives. The general corrective, to my mind, is to be found in a simple statement that I found on the website of the Press Council of India. And I quote, "If the press is to function effectively as the watchdog of public interest, it must have a secure freedom of expression, unfettered and unhindered by any authority, organized bodies or individuals." But this claim to press freedom has legitimacy only if it is exercised with a due sense of responsibility. The press must, therefore, scrupulously adhere to accepted norms of journalistic ethics and maintain high standards of professional conduct. End of quote. The focus is on the unavoidable need for journalistic ethics and professional conduct. Would this audience have serious disagreement on defining and implementing these terms in letter and spirit? If yes, how are these objectives to be attained? Talk of external correctives has entered the public discourse. Freedom, a philosopher once said, is the appreciation of necessity. In this case, of discipline to attain the norms to which the media autonomously subscribe. I thank Justice Katju for inviting me. Jai Hind.